for that, meet that obligation, and not go in default. And as well, we have the ability to continue to pursue grants. The percentage of our rate, our level of rates is one of the factors that is considered in eligibility for grants. So if we want to continue to play in that arena, we really do have to keep our rates at a certain level. The state wants to see that we're doing our share to pay for this project. So they're willing to contribute the additional funds, but we need to have rate revenue at a certain level to be eligible. Those things are things that I just want to highlight. If the board wishes to go to take an action other than simply suspending the rate increase in September and wants to go to the $5 decrease or the 10% decrease, I would ask that we go back and do the analysis on what the impacts would be to our existing obligations and our eligibility for future grant funds before that action is taken.
Excuse me, what is that? Excuse me.
Go ahead.
When we have to prove we have enough in our rates,
Loan
what
to
is
debt-
that rate?
Loan to debt ratio.
Uh-huh. And what is that? 125
Jeff,
to something?
can I ask this question?
Yeah.
Jeff, how do these alternatives conform with what's required of our loan to debt ratio for our credit rating or any loans that we have outstanding?
We just passed our loan reviews for both loans as of June 30th, 2014. I really can't give a definitive answer at this particular point on the $5 per month or $10 per month because I don't have the data in front of me. I haven't done the analysis, but we have to stay at 120 to 125 coverage ratio. And we were able to do it this past year. I don't think if we decrease, especially with our increasing expenditures, if we're going to be able to meet that. But that's my gut feeling. But I do want to point out one other thing here. And Dave, I'm going to have to ask you to go back a couple slides, but let's stay on option D for now. If you look at the second column, cash after debt service, this is reducing it by 10% in addition to no increase September 1. Look at the fiscal year 17-18, $325,791. That's about all the money you're going to be getting on an annual basis to fund this program. That's after debt service, and it goes out until 2021. So you're not going to be having a lot of funds available to do any projects. Especially if you have a $1 million plus project, you're going to have to wait at least 3 years to be able to do that project. If you go back to slide 11, option C, you can see on the same line, fiscal year 17-18, you'll have more money, about $469,000. But again, if you have a multi-million or $1 million project, like some of our projects that we're going to be doing this in this 3-year plan, it's going to take some time to be able to do those projects. Now, if you go up to option B, no September 1 increase, it goes up to about $778,000 per year. A little bit better, but you're still challenged. But if you look at add that number up, 778 plus your cash balance, now you've got about $1.8 million in fiscal year 18-19, and that's kind of where I was going at. The revenue in 18-19 plus your cash balance, you'd have sufficient funds to do some projects. Of course, that's not as much as you would have if you go up to option A again, Dave, that's slide number 9, the $1 million a year plus the $1.5 million balance. But if you're talking about option C and D, you really aren't going to have funds to do a lot of projects, especially if we run into a regulatory issue or a sewer spill that we're not going to have the funds available to do major projects.
So I've got a question for you, Jeff. Let's say that we'll pull one of these out that grants haven't been identified yet. If the $5 million Ebbets Pass Reach 1, let's say that we get a $2.5 million grant that doesn't have or isn't tied to pay back the loan. Basically, it's kind of free money. Where does that $2.5 million savings then that the grant provided, where does that go? Does that end up going in the cash balance at the end of that fiscal year?
Well, we're talking wastewater on Reach 1.
Right,
The
right.
slides I'm showing you now is for wastewater.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I would like to address that question when we get into water.
I could ask the same question on one of the wastewater treatment things.
Well, it's required to stay in R&R.
It's required to stay in.
Yeah, was one of the requirements that that the previous board put into it. We can't use it for operations.
Okay, gotcha.
And maybe Director Stange, I think maybe that's why part of the annual analysis that we do with the board has to be, updating the project list, but also updating all of the cash flow analysis and taking into account grants that have been actually obtained. And if that provides additional flexibility to us and extends the rate revenue that we have, that might give the board more options on rates.
And then included in that would be other revenue streams that we're going to
Hopefully,
undoubtedly
yes, hopefully, definitely. That's
be exploring, so that, on paper, we can't put it now, but as we update on a yearly basis, or as the...
Well, one thing that will always be true is there will always be projects, and things are always going to break, and we're never going to collect enough money to satisfy it all. I mean, it just can't happen. Never has in the history of the water industry that I'm aware of. Sad but true. And there's another point that Dave brought up that I can remember a few years back. I think it was the EPA came out, and they made a recommendation that, and I'm not saying I support this or anything. I don't. I wish we were, charging what we did 20 years ago. But it's not realistic. But their recommendation was, they're going to put rate requirements on grants. If you're not up to, and I remember the number was $100 a month for water and sewer.
I remember that.
That was back when you were here.
Yeah.
That was their goal, to get water rates up to $100 a year, and then you would be able to, you could apply for federal.
$100 a year?
$100 a month, I'm sorry.
$100 a month.
And that's just water, that's not a combined water, wastewater.
No, so it was individually. And that was just a recommendation that they came out with, and that's the kind of, I'm not saying we need to try to live up to that.
Well, let me,
It's definitely not the recommendation.
It's just a reality. It's a reality where the industry's going, and grants one day will be tied to that.
so educate me a little bit, Jeff. The more grant money we receive, one would think that the more cash balance we would have at the end of the year. But
That
yet,
is correct.
Okay,
And one of the things to think about on grants, especially when we're talking sewer projects, most of our sewer projects that you're looking at are in Copper area, and we will have some in La Quintana in the future. Obviously, up the hill and then it's past Arnold area and then West Point. Copper and La Quintana do not qualify now for grants through Prop 84, Prop 1, or some of these other funding sources because they're not disadvantaged communities. We've been very it's kind of a double-edged sword. I don't want to say fortunate but we've been able to secure grants for West Point Wilseyville because it is a disadvantaged community, and that's why if we get this grant from the State Water Resource Control Board for $4.5 million, we can proceed with the West Point Wilseyville project. And that's probably one of the only ways we're going to be able to do it at this point. Now, when we're talking on the Ebbets Pass area, for Reach 3A and in the future Reach 1, we were able to get some funding for Reach 3A. We got $1.3 million in grants, but not 100%. And we have to do a income eligibility survey to see if we can get grant money for Reach 1 moving forward. But as Dave mentioned, we try very hard and take every opportunity possible to try to get grants. And when we do get grants, that'll offset some of the costs and will increase our cash balance.
How often do they survey your earnings? Because I'm hearing,
Whenever the
excuse me.
federal government does the census, so every 10 years. If we don't qualify under the census block data, we have to perform our own median household income survey. We
Right.
don't do it, we have to hire somebody to do it.
which is what we did down at, where was it, Lake Comanche or somewhere,
I hope we weren't doing any more work at Lake Comanche.
Douglas Flat House.
Douglas Flat?
Yeah.
Because we've had ratepayers from Forest Meadows come in and say, where do you get off that we're earning $100,000 a year? And so that's my input.
I think there's just, particularly up there, it's a lot of retirement income. It may not be your average worker, but it's, people with good pensions that live in their dream house,
Or build a shed.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we've got, Jeff, we're now on to water option A on the rates and revenue projections. I won't belabor this. I know we've spent quite a bit of time on the wastewater, but you can see state the status quo with the rate increase in September 1st. We're looking at total revenue of 13.5 after debt service. And that capital R&R rate for water would be 22.39 of the component of the charge, plus, of course, the 39.50 on O&M. Option B, with suspending the September 1st increase, capital R&R goes to 17.28 for a current monthly rate of 56.78. Comparably, we would see a revenue decrease in the 3-year time frame of over $2 million. Anything to add on this, Jeff?
No, but I think at this particular point in time, if you look at the third column under no increase on September 1, if you go down again to fiscal year 17-18, that's about the annual money you will be getting after debt service. Although the debt service on this particular loan is increases in the final years. You're paying down more in principal in years 5, 6, and 7 than you do in the first few years. Are we clear if I make sense on that one?
And that retires when, that debt?
Fiscal year 2021.
So it's, with the, I don't think it's very likely, but if we didn't borrow any more money, then we would have more revenue later on.
That is correct. And I think that goes in line with what you were saying earlier, Director Davidson, about taking a look at our capital projects and running it through to the end of the loan period. Match it up.
Yeah, I would like to see that.
And Jeff, going to option C, we would look at, we're looking at the $5 decrease. We'd be at a position by FY 17-18 of about 1.725 in annual revenue, and that represents a decrease from the with all increases of rates, it would a decrease of 4.2 million. And then option D lastly, 10%, we're looking at a $4.48 million decrease, and revenues would be at 1.6 million by FY 17-18. But of course, as Jeff mentioned, there could be that would be reduced as the debt payments increase and the return go on.
What is the proposed increase this, is it $6? What is it, Zeman?
It's going to be
From 80?
$10.22 for water and $18.96 for sewer monthly.
Really?
Jeff, what is are you just specifically the September 1 increase?
Yeah, I'm just wondering.
Jeff, can you give us just a brief synopsis of the rate increases in the September 1 increment?
And let me figure it out. I apologize.
I didn't think it was that much.
Yeah, it is.
Couldn't you just look at slide 13 and 14 and, or maybe, yeah,
Those slides are
You
messed
have
up.
it here.
yeah, the proposed monthly rate would be 61.89 versus, if we don't do it, 56.78.
So it's $5?
So it goes
Person in Underhill? Mm-hmm. For water, it would be an increase of $5.11 per month.
Right.
Two numbers right here.
So that's $10.22 per bill.
This is if we don't do
Yeah,
it.
because you're looking at a 2-year bill.
Right. 2 month, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is that line item on capital R&R, so without taking any action, if the rate increase goes into effect, it goes up to 2239. If you eliminate the next rate increase for September 1, it goes down to 1728 on a monthly basis. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead here. Jeff, I'm leaving the water slides actually. Let's see, we're on to capital R&R. This again is a list of the projects. I won't add anything here. I know we've covered projects quite a bit.
But we're only looking at 6 projects versus our previous item was, had 8 on there. And I want to make sure we took out West Point backup filter and Jenny Lynn AB transmission line as priority 7 and 8. Is that?
Let's see, actually.
No, we didn't take out priority 7 and 8. We took out 2 different. And so I'm just wondering what was
We
the
took out
analysis?
Sheep ranch
the
is done.
Techite.
Yeah, the West Point Backup Builder and Sheep Ranch, because those are projects we're anticipating grant funding for, and if we don't receive grants.
So we know we got high priority projects that aren't going to be done in this first 3 years on the water side.
Again, I'm sorry that we should have made this crystal clear in that this is implementation of the same program of projects, including those that would be entirely grant funded. But we're just looking on this agenda item strictly at the cash flow side of it, and because we're anticipating those projects would be fully grant funded, they're not on this projection for expenditures and associated revenues. So, and I think the reason why is because we're saying if we don't get the grants, if we don't get 100% grant funding for these projects, we're gonna take a step back and assess whether we move forward with these projects or not within the 3 years.
Just based on whoever can answer this question best, and Jeff, maybe you might, or Charles and Dave, maybe you might be. What is the percentage of certainty that we are feeling that we're going to get these grants? I mean, is it a 50-50?
Yeah, if you deal directly with the, maybe Bill would probably be he's one that has spent the most time with the people.
And the reason I'm asking is we got, our 4th priority item on our water side is that's pretty high, and it would be most likely something that is going to be done. What we've identified as the 4th priority project, and I'm just wondering, I mean, because of that, what is, if it's 50-50 chance that we're going to get a grant, we're probably doing this a little bit wrong. If it's a lot better if it's 80-20, 90-10. And we're almost positive we're going to get the grant, I can see doing this analysis and not including them. But I think it's better to plan and be conservative and not think we're going to have federal or state money in our hands. And then if we do, we're happily surprised and in a real good position. If we don't, if we don't get it, we're back to the drawing board. I mean, as soon as in less than a year, maybe.
Well, and that's a great point, and I think what the staff's recommendation is a suspension of the rate increase for September 1st, and on the water side in particular, you'll see that there still would be adequate funds that we would have to, and again, this would be with input from the board, but if we don't get the grant funds on those other projects, we would still have the flexibility with cash on hand to be able to go forward with those if that's what we need to do. Whereas if you do the $5 or even the 10%, it becomes more. There's our flexibility is going to be constrained to some extent. But I definitely understand where you're coming from. The Blaganville Pond is a water supply for Sheep Ranch. It's our ability to exercise our water rights. It's storage. It makes all the sense to restore it. We want to go after the grant funds because there is a lot of money being allocated for this kind of project. But I do think that if we didn't get the grant funds, we would have to look at do we phase it differently. But I think that again, the action today, what we're recommending would still provide the flexibility that we could, if that is still deemed to be one of the highest priority projects without grant funds, to move ahead with it.
Okay. This is a comment to your grant, how do you feel about it? How certain are you, 80-20 or 60-40? It's very hard to determine. I mean, you're going to, dot your I's and cross your T's and...
We do get some pre-qualification.
Oh, yes. Like we did for 3A. and we were able to come through with that $1.3875 million. But again, it's,
I have some questions.
certainly.
Been rather quiet here, listening to the conversation. Jeff, I've got 3 questions. One is, we borrowed the $6.3 million, that's 2.3 for sewer and $4 million for water, when?
In April of 2014.
April 2014, and let's see, how much of that money have we spent to date?
0.
And what are interest payments yearly right now? How much have we paid in interest since April of 2014 on the money we've loaned?
About 2%.
2% of, okay. So when do you expect that we will actually be able to use the funds that we have loaned out? At what juncture do you see that?
On the sewer side, the 2.3 million, that's going to happen very quickly. That's for the Copper Cove Lift Station 22 project, and Charles can address the start date better. But I anticipate the balance of that project to be done within the next probably 4 to 5 months maximum. So we will be using a significant portion of those proceeds for that project.
Yeah, my concern is how much we've borrowed and how much of it is considered idle funds sitting in accounts. We're paying interest on it when we don't have the money, or the project's ready to roll and the money ready to be spent.
We are earning interest on those funds, so they're not sitting, I'm putting them to use in FDIC insured CDARs, getting between 70 and 90 basis points based on the term of those, but I've maximized the amount of yield I can get on those proceeds based on the timing of the projects.
So you're looking at a net gain or a net loss of about 70 basis points?
Maybe 110.
110, okay.
I think the reason for the timing of that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, is that the interest rates were so good at that time, and if we tried to go get the loan now when we need it, it might be a little bit different, is what we thought.
Well, I think
That's true, and we also anticipated some of these projects starting earlier than this summer.
the Ebbets Pass water line thing, that was one of the things that was a surprise, because we were being told that project was going to be, get started right away, and then we found out that we had, we're going to do it next year. And that was a surprise to the board, I can assure you. But it's, everyone likes to bring that interest up. I'll defend that all day long. We are at an all-time low with interest rates and construction costs. Or not, I can't say all-time low. We're at a very historic low level. Construction prices are not escalating. We need to spend that money now. If we wait for 3 years to do it, or if we wait till we save it, we will pay more for those construction projects. I almost guarantee it. I mean, that's just the nature of those projects. The construction index goes up by a few percent every year anyway. If you could borrow money at 2.58 and save yourself 4 or 5% of an escalating construction price, you've saved money. And so I mean that was the philosophy behind that, and I still defend it. I think that if these projects are a priority, we need to get them built as fast as possible, and then pay it back as fast as possible.
I just wanted the whole point of the interest and that in the mix of the discussion, so that everybody knew what that was. Whether it's right or wrong, it's just a matter of having it in the mix.
And I think you noted, Jeff, on the wastewater side, how we anticipate using those funds. On the water side, I would expect we would use the loan, or the loan proceeds on 3A most immediately.
What slide are you on, Dave?
Yeah, now we're on to the water and R&R projects and the 3-year capital R&R program. This is the chart that we showed to the engineering committee.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking that the work that we largely anticipate between now and the end of next fiscal year would be the most substantial expenditure would be on the 3A project, and so I would expect that's where we would allocate those loan proceeds to immediately.
Yes, and when we reach 3A, we're going to be using the loan proceeds on that particular project, and we're going to be starting, we've got some other projects start in next fiscal year. So next fiscal year and beyond, in the next 2 fiscal years are going to be very, very active.
Okay.
Yeah, when I look at the water R&R projects, I see a lot of grant support for those. You know, the Ebbets Pass, the Reach One, we have a history of the, you know, receiving grants on that. That's the big $5 million one. And most of those projects, if you take those away, are all in disadvantaged communities or benefit disadvantaged communities. You can discuss the tank management program or the redwood tank replacement. All of those are relatively small, you know, investment numbers. The total is $2 million on that. So I see some opportunities in the water end of things for a significant consideration of a decrease of $5 per month. Granted, I'm hedging my bet that the historic grants will continue to support those rural disadvantaged communities. Again, when I look at the projects, the water out, you know, the water projects out there, I see a lot of grant support to make those happen, more so by far than the wastewater side, because a lot of those are in Copper Cove. Yeah. So,
Okay.
And I'll just wait for the new,
Okay, so looking at water cash flow option A, into 17-18, we're looking at a cash balance of $6.2 million after project costs. You go to option B with the suspension of the rate increase, we would look to have just over $4 million in cash balance.
Dave, can I jump in here for
Yeah.
just a moment?
You bet.
Now, one of the things that we looked at there on the project list was the Jenny Lind AB transmission line. And if you look at the project list and the cash flow back on slide 18, you can see we've only allocated $400,000 to that project. That's the early design phase. The construction phase will begin in 18, 19, and maybe into 1920. That's a $4.5 to $5 million project. And so when you look at the cash balance available with no September 1 increase of $4 million, that'll basically pay for part of that construction project. And unfortunately, when we're looking at transmission line replacement, unfortunately, Jenny Lind is not a disadvantaged or rural community that we can get funds for. We've got to be very careful when we're looking at grant opportunities. USDA has been very helpful to us. When we look at Prop 84 money, well, this is the next round is actually the last round, so we're probably not going to get any money there other than possibly Sheep Ranch or West Point. But one of my concerns here is coming up is when we look at USDA funds for Reach 1, we have to do that income analysis, that median household income analysis to see if we qualify for it. Plus, and I'm not saying this is going to have an effect, but we're losing our friend Frank Rizzo to retirement here
Right.
pretty soon. And I believe the Reach 3A was his last project he's going to be working with CCWD on. And I don't know who's going to be replacing him and how that process will continue. But I know we're going to miss Frank.
Okay, so Jeff, I'm going to move on to option C, water cash flow, option C. This would be with a $5 decrease. We would be at just over $2 million at the end of 17-18. If you go to option D, we would be at 1.78 with a 10% decrease. Let's see. Again, here are the options on wastewater funding. I'm on the slide wastewater funding options, Jeff, on 23.
Yes, this is just a summary of all the slides you saw previously.
Okay. And on the water funding options. And so you can see the difference in cash balance at the end of each period there at the bottom. So that does go to, available funding to implement projects beyond that time frame. And that's why think we're last slide we'll get to is a recommendation. That's why ultimately we landed with a recommendation that, that the September 1 rate increase be suspended for water and wastewater. That option B is the staff recommendation, but not to make the additional cuts at this time. And what I would suggest, and as said before, I think on an annual basis as we come back with this, we really need to do that financial analysis of the grants that we've received and whether we have others in the works that we didn't anticipate before, and does that give us the flexibility to do additional cuts, some of the things that we're even considering today with the options C and D, would that be available if we are successful on those? That would be the approach that I would recommend to the board. Certainly, it's your decision to make on this.
What's the timing necessity? I mean, here we are, it's almost April. Seems like we got a little time before this is an issue. Is there a Prop 218 issue that we have to go through, or anything we could suspend this and that would be that?
Yes, there's no Prop 218 issue. You've already adopted the rate increase, so it's to suspend it and counsel if you have any other belief in this, but it wouldn't require to rescind that.
Let me ask you this.
The request of the action would be suspending it, so that would in itself would trigger another.
What if it were postponed? Could we postpone it for a year? And would that give us any value to not go through if we decided to, because what I'm afraid is we're going to get the rest of these projects. We're going to realize we don't have enough money. And then, so we're going to go spend a bunch more money to do something that we already did. I think that's a logical concern. We've had, we thought we were going to get a lot of grants in the past, and then the Army Corps, goes into moratorium, and you're not, that's just something that can happen at the federal government. I don't think our election is guaranteed coming up in the federal government. California's California. I mean, I just hate to be so dependent on grant funding, and then I just don't want to tie us in a knot. I really would like to see that list expanded, at least have some potential projects and some dollar amounts, so we can look at the money that we plan to have on hand. And I'm assuming that if the board decides to go and either freeze this or reduce it, they don't want to ever have to do it in the past. Or they don't want to have to do it in the future. You never want to raise rates again. So that being said, we're going to have to live with the money that we have, and I think we at least owe it to the owners of this company, the people, to tell them that we may or may not be collecting enough money to fix these pipes, so reliability could suffer. That's just the price we got to pay for lower rates. So I just would like to, I'm content with, I don't know that I'm content with reducing the funding from what I've seen, but I see some logic in going with staff recommendation for at least a period of time, and then we see where we are. We may have a growth spurt. I don't think that's likely, but I at least want to see all the projects come out till the end of that 7-year loan, or at least an estimate of ones that would be out there, and then make a decision based on more than 3 years of projects, because 3 years of projects in our life is not very long.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I do want to say about it, and I'm not one who would say I'd like to suspend the rate increase for another year. People, our ratepayers, knew we had to raise the rates. But the impact of that rate increase was what, made it all fall apart, Jeff. That was what it was.
Bertha, I totally know. And you know why it was that way? Because we were afraid to raise rates 5 years before.
We raised them, you mean when the 2007 was
when
up?
the economy went down and we were getting $1 million less income every year, at that point we were under pressure to do something, and we just said no, we can't. The people can't afford it right now.
Okay, we did the 2007 that went to 2011, and it was at 11 that you didn't want to raise the rates.
Right.
Okay, because one of the things that I'm looking at is the fact that I represent 45% of the water connections in CCWD up in Ebbets Pass. 45%. And, just like all the rest of you directors, you cannot go to the post office, you cannot go get gas, you cannot go buy groceries without hearing about these rates. And so that's why it is just something that I need to do. And, I came up with the freeze the rates and then go for another 10, which would make the rate increase overall 30% instead of the 40 that it is now. But I'm looking at all these figures, and Jeff has put it all together, and honestly, this 10% is not going to work.
I think we forget that what was proposed was 45% higher than what the previous board actually.
Well, that was my point, that what staff brought to us when we did the rate increase in 2013 was 5 consecutive years of
Right,
of
and then
rate increases.
Jeff came through and because of all of the hoopla,
Yeah.
took out the 2
Right, so we
last 2
suspended,
years.
we've already suspended.
And we
2 years.
reduced the third year also.
But let's look at 25, 15, and another 10. That's 50% increase in your water and sewer, and that
Well,
is-
Jeff, can I ask one question? If we do suspend and take recommendations of staff and do suspend this year's September 1 increase, have we studied that for our debt ratio?
We should be okay, and I put a caveat to that. There's 2 things that I'm looking at that may affect us. One is the drought and its effect on our consumptive revenues on the water side. If you remember correctly, I reduced our consumptive revenues by 25%, or roughly $360,000 for this year. So if we continue at that rate, I think we'll be okay, because we're also seeing a slight increase in property tax revenues. And when they look at our coverage ratio, they take into account all our revenues, our O&M revenues, our R&R revenues, property tax revenues, and everything else. So I think we're going to be okay with the September 1 rate increase, unless the drought really hits us super hard. And I can't predict that. So if people continue to use the water the way they are, and we're at our 18 to 20% decrease in consumption, I think we'll be okay. I don't think we'll be there if we go to option C or D.
Okay, one more follow-up question. You did indicate that they would take into consideration all income to the district, including rates and other sources of revenues. In these next 3 years, are we anticipating, like we are the grants, we're anticipating money coming in from grants? Are we anticipating alternative
other streams
revenues
of revenue, right?
in that 3 years?
Not in 3 years. I can't see it.
I understand that your board is looking at other revenue options in regards to maybe water transfers. At this particular point in time, I'm not counting on that. However, if they do come in, they would be counted as revenue towards our debt coverage ratio. What I'm looking at is strictly revenues from rates, both the O&M and the R&R, our property taxes. Those are the 3 major components of our revenue. Plus, we have other revenues such as hydro and other revenues available to us.
Which we are not likely to see.
Yeah, thank you.
We're not really likely to see any significant hydro rates over the course. I mean, there's no.
They will most likely decrease.
Okay.
We might need to look at the O&M budget a little closer and see if we can find additional funding through that side of the business as well. It's just one of those pieces that when you look at the whole budget, you have to see where are my priorities and what sources of income am I going to use to fill those. And I just see that there might be room in that O&M as well.
Can I ask, do you think, are we taking this in the right order, or should we be doing this after we do our budget? I mean, if we can do this, in August, it's going to have the exact same effect as if we do it today. And I just think that there's a little more information that we should be gathering here to make this decision. And like I said, if staff can continue to make the recommendation with that 7-year project list out there, that we're going to have, a reasonable amount of funds for future projects, because they will be there. They'll have to be done. And we should at least know about that. But I just wonder if we should be doing these in conjunction with our budget.
Jeff, maybe that's a question for you. Would an action today on rates in September be helpful in budget development process?
Or the vice versa? Which would you prefer?
Got it.
May I speak up?
Just this once.
Question for you.
And this is, Director Davidson, you make a very good point. However, when we're looking at the budget, the O&M budget is not completely separated from the capital R&R budget. There are portions where they kind of overlap, especially in the staffing required to perform the projects. And what we need to do to be able to set up our staffing allocation and our budget for staffing allocation to meet these projects, I need to know what projects are going to be there in the budget, how much money we will have available for those, and that is that's going to be one of the key bases for my preparation of the budget. So from my point of view, and I'm being very selfish here, for me to be able to put together this budget, I would really like to be able to have some direction today on this. That's why we've been kind of pushing it forward to try to get this done this month so we can use this to build the budget.
Correct. That's what I wanted.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Director Strange?
I guess my question, looking out in the future, is our FERC relicensing and the millions of dollars it's going to take to make that happen. Do we have a strategy in place, a budget? Are we looking at funding mechanisms to make that happen in the near future? Jeff? Dave? Hell!
I wish I could say that we have a plan for how we're going to finance that, because it is critically important that we put forward a strong effort in that on the relicensing. We do have a little time, and that we have until 2032 that it expires. But clearly, the work to do all of the analysis and everything to get to the relicensing takes years in advance of that. And again, we want to, that's too important an asset to our county. We need to do our best job on it. I think that's part of the thinking of why we've got to be as proactive as we can in trying to find other sources of revenue. That's one of the things that I think about a lot is that and protecting our water rights. I mean, those kind of bedrock assets that we need to have funds available to protect them, to realize them, to maximize benefit from them. But you're it's spot on. I mean, and this really goes to, I know Director Mills has a strong concern about use of property tax revenue for O&M. It goes to, a lot of the same kind of thing. I mean, and we want to, if we have other sources of revenue to be able to deal with some of these things, to put ourselves on a little stronger footing, I think that we have to try to make that work.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's hit the accelerator pedal on this increased funds or additional sources of funding. I mean, we really need to make it happen. The bottom line.
And the decision today is going to help us to decide how far we're going to go and how quickly we want to move and how we task the staff in getting that done. So, public comment at this point?
Yes. All directors have spoken. Public comment.
Bill McHale. I guess I have a question for you here. It kind of seems like you're sitting here with a crystal ball out for the next 5 years and trying to decide, on a Ouija board, what's going to happen, and it's pretty cloudy. I didn't hear, well, Dave kind of mentioned it offhandedly, but I wonder if it's an option that it seems like if you did take option B and you at least reduced or eliminated the 15 rate, because it'll be real good philosophically to have people not have to pay the increase while they're also getting a decrease in their water supply. Otherwise, it's a double whammy that wouldn't be a real good idea. could you reinstitute the 15 increase in 16 when your crystal ball got one more year unclouded?
That was the same question I
Yeah,
had.
that was,
Yeah, I didn't quite understand it that
Well,
way,
the
I'm
only
sorry,
reason,
but.
well, the only reason I even brought it up was the fact that I just wanted to know because it's expensive to raise rates. You have to have all the public hearings, and there's good reason for it. But if there was the option to postpone it, we can always cancel it another time. I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying it's an option that might save the district, $100,000.
So if it's a possibility, my suggestion was to task staff to do the analysis of what would be if that rate increase in 15 was postponed a year. He did a good job. Balances would be if no increase ever went in, it seemed like, but we never did the analysis if we postponed the 15 increase to 16, et cetera. So that's one of the pieces of the puzzle it seems like you might also want to look at.
yeah, the motion is approving a suspension of the September 1st.
But that cancels it, right?
Maybe this is Matt can give us some clarity on what our options are.
You could suspend it for 1 year, and then you wouldn't have to do the 218. It would just raise in 2017, it would raise the following year. So you could suspend it for 15. It could raise in 16, and then you could readdress it next year.
We could have this we could have this item on our agenda to, if we just suspended it for a year,
1
we
year.
could get rid of it next year if we were,
Yes.
and we would have a year's worth, we'd be a year closer to the crystal ball or into the crystal ball.
Yeah, you could do that, or you could suspend it. I think the way it's set right now is you suspend it completely for the next 3 years, or you could suspend it for 1 year and then it would automatically go into effect the following year, or you would.
Well, you bring up a good point. It was a 5-year rate plan with 0 increases over the last 2 years.
Yeah, 2 or 3, I think.
Am I mistaken about that? It was a 5-year increase?
right.
It doesn't.
Five-year study.
15, it raises in 15, and then at 15, 16, 17, it's the same rate.
Right.
So I don't know if that has value or not, but
Okay, I believe we have,
Marty Crane, Valley Springs. I just want to say that I love this full-body conversation. And I'm feeling really comfortable in the fact that we have historical perspectives so that we don't repeat same errors in the past, and we make better decisions moving forward. And we have different perspectives from every one of our board members and staff. And I really appreciate that, and the input from the public as well. I also wanted to, so kudos, thank you. But also I wanted to say that when I can't come here, I do watch it on television. And so that was a really good move, having this filmed. But I will tell you that part of hearing what someone's saying is being able to see their face. And on television, this person standing here is like a silhouette because of this window behind me. And so...
So you're proposing a remodel to our offices?
What's
Is
that?
what, you want us to remodel the offices for a capital
No,
improvement?
I'm just thinking if we flip these, and I've mentioned it to Joel before, but
Get rid of that door.
it's just something to consider, because if we're talking about all these things, and you are tasked with making all the decisions, not just the easy ones, and so when you have to make these tough decisions, which come all the time, would it not be better for those viewing public to have an underlying understanding of all the angst and everything that you went through and all the discussion and everything that came to the decisions that you're making by being able to really see well on the video? Anyway, but thank you for these conversations. This is excellent. Thank you.
any other public comment?
Yeah.
We actually did that one meeting. We'll do something else, I think.
Well, can I-
Madam President, I just want to note on the if you do suspend it for a set term of 1 year, that would give us ample time, because then it wouldn't go into effect any earlier than until September 1 of 2016. That would give us the time to be able to go through again an updated project list and financing plan for the projects going into next spring, and so that if you months ahead of that going into effect, you could make a decision just as you are today to say, no, we don't want to do that, and you could do it, you know, going in perpetuity if that's a decision.
I just really think that it's important that we get a little more information on this deal. I mean, I'm content to make a motion to do that here when everyone's ready, but I think that we have some serious questions about this. I think our water sales this year are going to be dramatically lower. I think people will look at the lake levels and not understanding what we have. You know, when we've got Tulloch, that I guarantee Lake Tulloch people are going to be conserving. Hogan is below the old dam. They're going to be conserving more than they did before. You know, anybody that's, that drives over Malonis is going to wonder where their water's coming from. We're going to have, significantly hundreds of thousands of dollars less revenue, I believe, this year, just on that one issue alone. And I don't know that won't carry over until next year.
It will.
We could have 3 or 4 years of this, of lower water sales. And like the gentleman said, it's like Tuolumne County, and they went through this. I'm sure you guys are all aware. Tuolumne County's board, they adopted a rate increase. They got 4 new board members. They fired their general manager. And then last year they came to the public because they conserved so much and say, hey, we're gonna propose a water surcharge, a conservation surcharge.
And now they're looking for another general manager.
Well, you can only imagine why.
So this general manager does not want to go there. I understand.
Well, all we have to do is be realistic with
the situation.
People will understand the truth if you give it to them. And So anyway, I'm going to make a motion that we adopt Resolution 2015 approving suspension of the September 1st, 2015 increase of wastewater rates, approved ordinance 2003-01, an ordinance modifying rates until September 2016. Is that adequate?
September 1, 2016, yeah. And that would be for water and waste.
Right, September 1, 2016.
With the amendment that we will come back at that point and revisit this entire.
Well, I hope we do it
That-
before.
always have that.
I hope we do it before.
We always have that opportunity to anybody.
Absolutely, that's the direction, and it's, to me, that's that's just going to be part of our agenda, what we have to bring each year to the board, and this one is going to be particularly important, given that if the board will have the opportunity to make a decision on the rate on that and anything else it wants to do on the rates for the program.
Okay, so we're going to be doing it consistently, or every quarter, or every month until September
Well,
of next year.
we will come back next in 1 year, next spring, with an updated project list and an updated financing plan for those projects. Between now and then, we will come to the board with regular reports on how we're doing on the projects to show that we are making progress on these projects. And as well, that's part of what the public outreach and education we want to do, is to really let people really understand what is this asset that we are building for the community. Again, most of this stuff is happening. It's behind locked gates. It's underground. People don't see it. It's not as readily accessible to the public. So we need to do that so that people understand how we use these funds. That we did complete the work we said we would. And I think that's we're gonna have to make that part of it. And so you'll see how those projects are going and when they're concluding and how we did under, whether we came in within budget, whether we did better than estimated,
and whether or not we get some of the grants. Some of them, some of them are significant that would certainly change my mind.
Or other
revenues.
Or other revenues, because we keep saying grants, but
There's other
we
income.
we have to be honest about it, again, whether or not we do get it. So let's look at other revenue streams. That's what. Yes.
So the way the motion reads right now is the motion reads to postpone the third increase of the 2013 study to, instead of September 1st, 2015, to September 1st, 2016.
Yes, for water and wastewater.
Okay. And I'll second that motion.
Okay. And so we had another motion and a second. Initially, you made that. So.
On what?
Right?
No, this is the only.
That was to adopt the project list.
Okay.
Yeah.
7B.
Yeah, I think we voted on that.
Okay.
I mean, quite honestly, I'd be more in favor of
Budget
option C myself, considering where we've been, and tasking the staff to find those other revenue sources and be a little bit more in the revenue stream side of it as well as the budget side of it, making it more accountable to our ratepayers. So, I mean, I'm looking at option C myself in this whole thing.
I'm looking at kind of a hybrid. I'm supporting option B in the wastewater end of things and option C in the water end of things. I think that with a 5% reduction in wastewater, it really puts us too close to the edge, but I think we have ample, at least my opinion, and hope is that we have ample reserves in the water end of things to allow for that option C 5% reduction.
Okay, now, option C,
$5
$5. See, that
I'm
was
sorry,
$5.
what did I say, 5%?
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
yeah.
$5, thank you.
Madam President, Director Strange, the one, and Director Mills as well, the one consideration that, again, we haven't evaluated is whether that would have any impact on our existing loan obligations and then our eligibility for future grants. And so I would just ask that before, if you do want to go, if the board wants to go to C or to D, that we do that evaluation before we implement that, just to make sure we're not, creating some kind of a conundrum for ourselves and ability to get the grants that we think is going to help to drive this program.
So that means we will not be voting on, or we will vote on.
motion and a second.
Yeah.
There's a motion and second
Okay.
to suspend the rate increase, keep things at current levels until 2016, September 1st.
And to be clear, we're comfortable that we can do that and still be within our obligations and eligible for grants. It's just if the board wants to take those additional cuts, that we'd like to do that analysis.
Dave, could we bring this up and do the vote on this right now, and maybe within the next 30, 60 days, bring back a hybrid as he's
Analysis,
suggesting, or just a straight C as I'm suggesting, and see whether or not that fits for a review of the board again?
You bet. No, we could do that. Yeah, that's certainly something we can do. I think, as well, we might want to do some of that work in compiling that longer term list of projects too, just to kind of have that perspective, because this will of course affect the cash balance at the end of the 3-year term and what we could do beyond that. So those are kind of the two considerations, thinking about our ability to do the out year projects and then our eligibility for grants and our commitments under a bond.
To include in that the seven-year study instead of a 3-year study? Is that what I'm?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. But I just want to make sure that if we do that, we have the time to do a good analysis and compile.
Well, that's, whenever we bring this back, that's fine, but I mean, I think this thing came before the board too soon. I know Jeff wants to have this information in front of his, for his budget, and I get that. But I don't, the project list is too short to make a long-term decision as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I'm content to hear this in the future, but I don't want it to be a month from now if we're not ready to have it, to have a good analysis of what we need to go forward. So I think the year suspension, and then we can revisit it at that point, or sometime in between here and there. But I don't know about a month from now. I don't know that. I mean, if you guys can get it done, then that's fine. But let's be realistic about your workload.
Yeah, and the fact that it falls at the same time as the budget development process,
Right, yeah.
which is going to be, I know this is not, whatever happens today is just the first part of this ongoing consideration of what could happen beyond this. So, and we'll do whatever work is necessary to give the board the information it needs to make that decision whenever it decides to make it in the future on whether it wants to go beyond what it's doing today. So maybe one idea would be to use a periodic interval that we would normally be coming to the board with a budget review, something like that, to do the analysis, bring it back. We can work that through committees as well. I mean, I think one of the priorities we need to work on coming into in the near term with our engineering committee is to work on development of that 7-year plan, as well. Maybe on the finance committee side, we can be looking at those other considerations on other revenue, flexibility, considerations about eligibility for future grants if we make reductions. All of that we can work through committee, and then by the time we get to the board in an interval where we would be revisiting the budget, we can present information, and if the board chooses to make a change at that point, it can.
Plus, I think one of the things that we'll be talking about during budget is, new staffing. We're currently understaffed. There's no question about that. And, so while, it's going to be nice to look at how many places we can cut, there's going to be some places we're going to have to grow. So that's another component, I think.